Good morning, everyone. When I was a student at the seminary, my professors would share stories with us from time to time about things they had experienced or seen throughout their lives and their ministries. Several of these stories have stuck with me, and there's one of them that I feel might apply to us today, given our gospel passage. This particular story is about a medium-sized church in a suburban town down in the south somewhere. This church was not a Greek Orthodox church, but it was near a Greek Orthodox church, which is how my professor knew about this story. And this particular church had been struggling with attendance. It seemed as the years went on, fewer and fewer people were attending services at this church. Now, this church had one of those big classic signboards out front, the ones where you can switch the letters so people can read announcements as they're driving by. You know the signs I'm talking about. They usually have a Bible verse or a quote or something written and displayed for everyone to see. But for 1 week, the sign of this church had a very interesting announcement posted. Townspeople and parishioners driving by and were surprised when they read the announcement, "Satan will be here this Saturday night." So now, all week long, as people were driving by the church, curiosity, of course, spread like wildfire. Conversations in the town began. Did you see? Satan's coming to church. Satan will be at our church. What does this mean? Intrigue and interest were through the roof all week until finally Saturday came. And now the Greek Orthodox priest who told me and my classmates this story was admittedly so curious himself that even he went to this church to see what this was all about. Now, on Saturday night, you could barely find a place to park in that church's parking lot. And this particular gathering took place in the basement or the reception hall of their church instead of the actual sanctuary or worship area. And now in the hall, every single seat was taken, and the room was so full that people were standing all around the sides of the walls and were blocking the doors in the back. They were jam-packed in there to see what this was all about. The people were all murmuring until finally the pastor of the church quietly walked in the room and everyone fell silent. The pastor looked around at them and began to speak. So you've all come looking for Satan tonight, haven't you? He began. Well, I'm very disappointed to say that he is indeed here right now. Satan is here amongst all of us, and he is living in our hearts. Every week we are called to come be with God in his church. Every week we have the opportunity to interact with him, to pray to him, to connect with him. But we do not come to see him every week. Perhaps we do not even come to see him every month. However, at the first sight or mention of Satan, we stop everything and come running to see him. The priest kept his message brief, and he assured his people that he was not upset with them, but was just illustrating this point because he loved them. He concluded by telling them to not forget that every single week they had the opportunity to come and encounter God. And we all have this opportunity, don't we? We all have the amazing opportunity to come and for 1 hour out of our week do something completely different. For 1 hour, we can think about God and God alone. We can pray to him. We can reflect on our past week. We can prepare for our upcoming week. 1 hour or so that is so different than any other hour in the week. But do we take advantage of this hour, or do we let it slip week after week, month after month? In our gospel passage today, we hear a story about a man who had been slipping himself. Today is the story of Zacchaeus, a man who in his time was a tax collector, which meant he was a very corrupt man. But through Zacchaeus, we see what happens when we make even the smallest effort to see Jesus Christ, to pursue Christ, to seek him out despite the chaos in our lives. Christ was passing through the town of Jericho where Zacchaeus lived. And at this time, Christ's popularity had grown so much that there was a massive mob all around him. And Zacchaeus was a short man, so he had no way of seeing Christ if he were staying on the ground with the rest of the crowd. So Zacchaeus got creative. Zacchaeus thought outside of the box, and most importantly, Zacchaeus took some action. So many things in life can pass us right by unless we ourselves take some kind of action. We hear mostly about wasted opportunities in terms of careers or in terms of fitness goals, but we often forget that our spiritual life requires action as well. If Zacchaeus had not taken action by climbing up that tree, Christ would have passed him right by. But Christ did not pass him by. In fact, the opposite happens for Zacchaeus. It says, "And when Christ came to the place, he looked up and said to him, 'Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for I must stay at your house today.'" Now, in those days, to stay at someone's house was the highest honor you could bestow upon someone. It was usually reserved for only the most respected members of society. So before this event, Zacchaeus barely even knew who Christ really was. But after putting forth a little effort to see him and to connect with him, Christ enters directly into his life in a very meaningful and powerful way. All that God and Christ are looking for from us is a little action, a little effort to connect to them, to get to know them, to reach out to them, and to pray to them. For Zacchaeus, this was climbing up in the tree. But what might it look like for the rest of us? Well, for starters, all of you in church right now are making probably the best effort and taking the greatest action by simply being here right now. Coming together on a Sunday morning in communal prayer and to receive Holy Communion is the most powerful way you can connect to God and Jesus Christ. But there are also many other supplemental ways, in addition to attending liturgy, that we can see God. We can look up different books about Orthodoxy and read a few chapters. We can look up any saint on a website known as Orthodox Wikipedia, which is a real thing, and read about the life of any saint. If you can't think of a saint, perhaps you can start with the one that either you or someone you know is named after, because after all of our names in the Orthodox world either are attributed to a saint or a feast day. And the most powerful way to connect outside of liturgy and communion is through some private prayer. Perhaps you have an icon or a prayer rope at home. Simply pray from the heart, and if you don't know what to say, the Lord's Prayer will always do. There are many, many ways to put forth effort and action into connecting with Christ like Zacchaeus does today. And once you do, Christ will enter into your life in ways you never thought possible. Amen.